Good morning. Continuing the review of the conclusion of Hemshech Ayin Beis, we are at the bottom of page 1415, Aleph Tav Tes Vav. So to review what we learned and also give some context to the overall picture. So indeed, this is a type of subsection in the central plot. The central plot of Ayin Beis, of course, is the theme of interface. We're discussing in this section that began on page 1350, the interface part of Mamayla Lamata, interfacing between the divine and existence, between the divine that manifests within existence with the divine that's beyond existence, through Torah Oyer. That's Hamshach Mamayla Lamata. Because Torah is given to us and Torah illuminates for us the path in life. So even though our soul is rooted higher than Torah, but the soul as it comes down below is shrouded in a dark world and thus needs a siyua, support, like the eye, the physical eye sees, but it needs in the dark, it needs an outside light to shine. And that light is Torah that shines and shines to us through the Einei Ha'eda, the leaders and teachers that guide us. Malachim also are part of that supervision and guide because they are the Einei Hashem, as we learned. Neshamas are a higher level, but that has to be triggered once the neshamas are illuminated by the light, the outside light. When I say outside, I mean outside of their entity. Then they come alive, and the neshamas can rise to their highest level. And he compared that as well to the difference between the eye and the pupil of the eye, where the eyes being the level that relates more to existence, the pupil of the eye is more the level that's beyond existence. The Hashgacha from Shem Havaya, as we learned. But that again needs to be accessed. So, and to explain that in Avodas Hashem, we went into the three levels of B'chol Avavcha, B'chol Nafshecha, B'chol Meidecha, which correspond to Mamala Kalam, the Sevav Kalam, and an Atzmus that's higher than both, and joins and unites them both, as we'll learn later. And so we're in the middle of that discussion, with Sevav Mamala being like Zeh Gilui. Sevav is more Hu, Lashon Nister, not present, not as in the Lashon Nister, meaning like in the third person, with Zeh being in the second person. And then there's the highest level, Atzmus Ein Sof. Now, even though in general we're speaking about two levels, it breaks into three, and we're in the middle of that discussion. But in bringing that discussion, he already started talking about who. He's speaking about who, the Makif, which in the Teva, the 5 times it says who, the 5 instances where it says who in the Teva for Lateva, like Avram, who Avram, is the Hamshache of joining the Makif, bringing it into the Pnimi. Avram, who Avraham, as we learned. That it connects those two realities, the transcendent and the immanent, the Makif and the Pnimi, Sevav and Mamala. But there's also who, a Makif, that can also feed the negative side. And that's the 5 times that it says in the Torah, L'ra, and that's what we're in the middle of. So though, in a way, it's not, you could say it's not the central theme of the general understanding of the interface, but it does, because he's addressing now, because we also have to contend with the negative forces in life. That also needs to be transformed in the interface process. It's not just a Gedusha. So he's dealing now with the Ra. So where's the negative energy get its power from? So he said it comes from the Gevurahs. That's the root of it. That's why it's 5 times. Just like there's 5 Chesedim, there's 5 Gevurahs. But in addition to that, it also gets it from the power of the Makif that is somewhat detached or removed or aloof or indifferent. A level of the Chesenius HaMakif, as we learned, where it's Chashech Ka'era. The darkness and light are equal. And I explained yesterday at length the process of why that's there. Because the fact is, because God wanted to have free choice and wants a dira b'tachtenim, so the fact is we need to have the ability to have an independent choice, which means we have to feel as an independent consciousness, and that's only possible if there's a concealment of the divine. As long as the divine is completely revealed, like before the Tzimtzum, there's no room for tachtenim, there's no room for avodah, there's no room, frankly, for anything except godliness. So the Tzimtzum is therefore creates this vacuum, creates this concealment that allows the room for independence. That independence is meant to be used for good purposes. The tzimtzum is in order to bring gili, but if it's misused or abused or misunderstood, the tzimtzum can lead, as he said, with ultimately not only to divine being concealed, but to actually negative experience, to ra, to a nimraid that defies and mutineers against God. The concept of pirud, the opposite of achdus, where everything is the pirud is essentially diversity, more than diversity, but ultimately divisiveness, the opposite of Hashem Echad. So that's where the Ra gets its power from. And we continued learning more details about that. He spoke about that that's the level of who, like we say, v'hu rachem yechaper, even without tshuva, the level of who can forgive, because in a sense it's like it overlooks, or it doesn't. It is not as meticulous in the hamshacha. Kama b'chinas kama yarech ampin erech hapayim lefonov. Certain tolerance and a certain allowance, even for the negative energy to get its energy. And that's necessary because they need energy. If you don't give the Lumaz its energy, you won't have these two choices. But it's not coming in a direct way. It comes in a form of acharayim, like he called it, b'chinas nefila v'shvira. That's the way that gets its energy. Or in the language of Tanya, it's like throwing something to someone over your back, meaning in a begrudging way. You're doing something not because you want to do it, because you need to do it. Now, obviously, Kavyochel by Hashem, you can't say those words. But similarly, is the idea that in order to give energy, it's not coming like Kedusha, it's coming to something that's bottled telekus. So they're receiving direct flow of energy in a very open and revealed way. Here it's Bechinas Nefila V'Shvira. And he compared this to the klippa that precedes the shell, that precedes the fruit. The shell is there only to protect the fruit, but it precedes it. And the same thing, Ize Masge Beresha, that first comes darkness and then light. Okay. And that's al derech vanechi haster aster ponei b'yemahu hahu, the hester zeh shebchinas hahu. From that's where they get their energy. So you need to have the klippa to protect the fruit. So how does the klippa get its energy? It's getting it in this form, so-called in a backwards way, but it gets it, the energy. Mashenkim b'chinas zeh. And that's why Esav said, Lama li zeh, because he did not want to have the level of zeh, because he wanted to be able to draw energy, and from a very strong revealed level, you can't draw the energy quite the same way as you can from this makif. As he continues, says, Pari is also Ben, he wanted to eliminate Ben because Ben refers to a level of Gili Eir, which will not allow Pari to draw energy from, and it's also the level of Pnimiyus. And this is why it says by Nimrod, Gibrat Said Lifnei Havaya, meaning going to this level of Makif, Lifnei, Tagbi Kanesha, lifting himself up to a place which is more indifferent and more detached. So there he can get his energy because there darkness and light are equal. However, Achkol Zeh is Chetzenius HaMakif, not Pnimiyus HaMakif. Because Chetzenius HaMakif allows for this indifference. But you go to Pnimiyus HaMakif, what's the real kavanah? Then it goes back to the kavanah is the Gili should only go to Kedusha, not the Klippa. So that's Chetzenius HaMakif. There we have Erech HaPayim Lefonov. K'chashech Geir, aber B'chinas Pnimiyus HaMakif, Shama kavanah B'chinas HaPnimiyus Davke, or B'chinas HaTev. And Adarab, there the kavanah is the Tev, and Adarab, from there comes the power to cut off the energy that goes to any of our enemies, to all his enemies. And the final piece we learned in this is the language, the expression where it says, Ach, Esav Yaakov, Esav and Yaakov are brothers. So there's a certain equality from the level of Chetzenius HaMakif, but in that very level, he is Oyev es Yaakov Davke. So the Eid and Sof, the Mile of Vishtalsha is higher than Teyu and Tikkun, where Esav and Yaakov both have are brothers. There's a level of Pnimiyus, Oyev es Yaakov Davke. as I explained yesterday, the meaning behind that and all these levels as they're established in the whole structure of Seder Shtalshlus and beyond. So bottom line is the kavanah is Kedusha. The kavanah is to transform this world into a home for God, for oneness of godness. In order to do so, you need to have the space and you need to have the concealment of the divine for us to be able to choose and create that dir b'tachtenim. So you need tachtenim. As soon as there's tachtenim, there's the possibility for the opposite. Like he said, the hey pamim that it says lira, the negative hey. Where do they get their energy? From a makiv, but it's a makiv chesenis a makiv. The Pnimiyus Makif is not that darkness and light should be equal. That light should not be dominant. Not that the shell and the fruit are equal. That the main thing, that the shell is only a means to the fruit, to protect it. So that is the Aveda that we need to do, is be mamshech from that Pnimiyus Makif. But chesenis Makif is in the system to allow the energy to flow in a limited way, a yenika, to the negative forces. And he just gave a whole bunch of examples. He brought Nimrod, Pare, Esav, all the villains in the Torah, how they are all looking to try to draw energy from the Makiv, not from the Pnimi, because they know that's not where they're going to get their energy. That's where we stopped the last line on page 1415. So in the context to the entire bigger picture, we'll soon see as he concludes this topic, but it's coming to understand what Makif is. Here it's Makif that's feeding the negative, but it also is helping us understand Makif in the positive, because now we've learned what Pnimiyus Makif is. So we're going to get back to the three levels that we're talking, Mamala, Seviv, and Atzmus, as we continue here, as you'll see shortly. So he says now like this, last line on page 1415.
Can I ask
the pages can be found at ayinbeis.com.
Before you move on. Sorry. The Bechinas Ben is more of a Giloy. Is that something everybody knows about? That it's a concept in Chassidus? He said that Paro said, Kol ha-ben ha-ilod. What's this?
It's explained in some places when you look at the psukim that talk about Kisazri Isha, Violdo Zochar, the difference between male and female, Ben and Bas. Generally speaking, the Zochar, the male, is usually more revealing. The woman is Kvuda Bas Melech Pnima, it's more intimate and internal. So this is a concept in other places in Chassidus, yeah.
And it manifests also spiritually?
Well, it starts with spiritual, that's where it begins, and then it comes into the physical.
So it reveals godliness more? I guess the Ben reveals godliness more?
It's a whole other discussion. It's not really for here. They both reveal godliness in different ways. It's like Ish Darke Lichbesh. The Ben, the Zocher, is more an outgoing, more aggressive energy, more expressive. The woman's energy is more of an intimate, deeper level of energy. So,
Okay.
One more outward, one is more inward. So they both reveal, just different ways they reveal. We learned earlier that Makabel and Mashpia, Makabel doesn't mean just receiving. Makabel is also an energy as well that accepts a different form of expression. It's more of a intimate expression.
Thank you.
Yeah. U'kamosher Kosav, the last line, V'hu over on page 1415. V'hu over lifneim. So he's talking about the psukim in Vayishlach. V'hu over lifneim. The pasuk v'hu. What's the v'hu? V'hu koya al-kodesh baruch hu. That the who is talking about God. Next page, 1416. V'hainu b'chinas ha-pnimiyus ve'atzmus, shezeu b'chinas pnimiyus ha-keser. So now we're talking about the Pnimiyus and Atzmis, like the Pnimiyus of Makif, of who? The inner and core, which is the inner dimension of Keser, Shu HaTokev Avdola. Like we learned about Atik, that's HaTokev Avdola, meaning it's removed and separate from. But this separate from can also be, there's two levels, as we said. There's Chesenis HaMakiv and Pnimiyus HaMakiv. Here he's clearly speaking about the Pnimiyus. So he says, Ubeshoshei, what is it, the level on its root? Just want to see the context. Where's the pasuk v'hu over lifneim? Is that in Vayishlach, as I just said?
I just posted.
You just posted it. Let's see. Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah, I thought so. So it's when Yaakov is meeting Esav in the beginning of Vayishlach, after many years of their distance. So it says, "V'hu over lifneim," he went on ahead. So who, yeah, and that's when he bowed to him and so on, right? So he's teaching "V'hu over lifneim." Who's the "V'hu"? So even though Bapashas is talking about Yaakov, he's saying that it's referring to God, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is meaning Yaakov as he's rooted, obviously, in this different, deeper level, like he just said. Ach Yesav Yaakov, Yaakov and Esav are equal in the Chetzenius Makif, darkness and light are equal, but in the Pnimiyus, Oyeves Yaakov Dafke. So in the Pnimiyus Makif, what he's calling out Pnimiyus HaAtzmi, Pnimiyus HaKesed, Shuatokev HaVdolah. That's why it's the level of who. Ubesharshe, what level is it in its root? Yeah, the verse is interesting. What is the verse trying to say even? What it means, who over the frame? He himself went ahead. Okay, because Yaakov went ahead of his family. They was traveling with his family, but he's being medayik.
He was ready to protect his family if there is a need.
Right. No, I understand. That's why he went ahead and he bowed before them. Then Vayoretz Esav l'Kreisei, and Esav ran toward him, and that's where they met and they embraced. I'm just trying to understand the connection to here. Whoever lifneim. So he's being mamshich from who? Let's see. Let me finish the whole piece here. So he says like this: what is it in the sherish? Chinas helam HaAtzmi, the Ein Sof. Okay, so suddenly we're back to helam HaAtzmi. Helam HaAtzmi, if you recall, is the third level, because if you remember, he spoke about the root of neshamas. He said is even higher than Torah. The root of neshamas is the helam HaAtzmi. What he called Shmei HaAtzmi HaKol Ba'atzmusei, Kodim Kekadmusei, even higher than the root of Seviv. That's what he said on the previous page. If you look on the previous page, we said that there's the level Shmei Hu Shmei v'Shmei Hu, Rosh Tevis Hu v'Shmei Echad. That's Hu, and he said that's the level. That is Gilui, but Shmei HaAtzmi is Helam HaAtzmi. And that's the Chadhu, that's Tov Mekulu. Remember, there's 5 times that it says Hu L'Teva, like Avram, Hu Avram. 5 times that it says Hu L'Ra, for the negative, like Nimrod, Hu, as we've been discussing. And then there's Tov Mekulu, is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's higher than all of them. And he explained that's the third level. That's the level of the Helam HaAtzmi. So now he's taking us back there. So that's the level, like what he's referring to is like Pnimiyus Makif. So there's Mamala Kalalman, that's the level of Gilui Zeh, Gilui Alakus, that manifests within existence. Hu is the level of Makif. There's the Hu L'Ra, that's like Chetzenius HaMakif. The Hu L'Teva, it doesn't say explicitly, but Pashtus is also not the Pnimiyus HaMakif. But the Hu, that Tov Mekulu, that's higher than all of them. The Hu that's higher than all of them is the third level called Helam HaAtzmi, and that's what he's identifying now as Pnimiyus. So we're identifying that as Pnimiyus, like he just said. Atik Avdal b'Shabchin Helam HaAtzmi v'Hu over lifneihem lamayla b'Chinis Yaakov ve'Esav, and that's what the pasuk is referring to. Not just saying that Yaakov went first. He's saying v'Hu over lifneihem. It's accessing a level that's higher than Yaakov and Esav, because Yaakov and Esav are brothers. And in the level that he said before, Makif, HaChetzenius HaMakif, or he said there you have Chashecha Ka'eda, you have both levels that are equal, And that's where Yaakov and Esav are like equals. But here we're accessing a level that's deeper, that Oyevis Yaakov Dafke, like he said, Oyevis Yaakov Dafke, which is the higher level of Pnimiyus Makif, rooted in Helam HaAtzmi v'hu. The hu, that is Tov Mekulu, meaning it has to be referring to the higher level of hu, of the Eibishter, the Shama Ika Yaakov Dafke. And that the primary force there is Yaakov Dafke. V'zeh inyan Islan Chad hu the Tov Mekulu. And that's what the Medrash says, that there's one that's greater or better than them all. So there's 5 Lateva, that's Avram hu Avram. That's still in the Neustalshus, but Kedem Alei Saratzen and Alei Saratzen, Makif and Pnimi. But there's one that's Mekulu Mekulu, B'chinas hu, B'chinas Stimet is called Stimen. This is a deeper level of hu, the concealment of all concealments, Shanelam V'nista Legamri. That's completely concealed and completely covered up. So the lower level of hu, that even the hula teva is nister, is still a nister, but it's not the same level as stima to call stima as Helam HaAtzmi. This is the level that's fundamentally concealed, like we learned earlier in the Ayin Beis, that there's 2 levels of concealment. There's concealment only from the perspective that it's not revealed yet, like let's say you say something is inside of a chest, or inside of a closet, or inside of a box. So it's nister, it's concealed, you can't see it, but you can't say it's fundamentally concealed because it's capable of being revealed. And then we learned about sasum be'etzem. Sasum be'etzem, sasum etzad atzmei, means that it's concealed fundamentally. It's not capable of being revealed. It comes from a level that's beyond revelation and beyond concealment. Sasum etzad atzmei. Shezehu, b'chinas Pnimiyus HaKeser, in after the Tzimtzum, that's the level of Pnimiyus HaKeser Atik, and its root is all the way in Shmaya Atzmi, like he said in Helam HaAtzmi. Like he said that B'shoshen is the level of Hu Shmaya, with Shmaya Kol Batzmusei, like Tachtena Shebemaitzil. That's what he said earlier on page 1415, as well as earlier on page 1407 and 1408. Where there he discussed it in the context that the root of the neshamis is there, even higher than Teira Eir, which is still a level of Eir, even Etzema Eir. But this is even higher than that. It's a Helam HaAtzmi, which is, like he said, Tachtena Shebemaitzil, or what he called Yeridus HaAtzmus, the higher level of it, as I explained in the previous class.
But this is higher than Shmoy.
Shalamayla Gam b'chinas Makir. Let me finish and I'll soon stop for questions. Shalamayla Gam. This level of Pnimiyus Makif is higher from the Makir of Chesed and Gevurah. Chesed and Gevurah is the Heich Sadim, that's the 5 times good, Hu for the Lateva, and 5 times Hu L'Ra. That's Chesed and Gevurah. And here we're talking about a level that's higher, the less smaller b'hayatika. There's no negative, there's no small, there's no Gevurah b'hayatika in Atik. So Atik is higher than Chesed and Gevurah. So Chesed and Gevurah are already 2 kavim, 2 tracks, and they're both a level of Hu. One is Hu, the Chesed Makif, that gives energy to the negative forces. One is Hu, I'm not going to say Pnimiyus Makif because it looks like Pnimiyus Makif is the higher one, but relatively speaking, it gives chayas to Kedusha, to like Avram, Hu Avram, but it's still Makif. And then there's the Pnimiyus Makif, what he's calling here Pnimiyus HaKeser, all the way rooted in Helam HaAtzmi, the Tov Mekulu, that's higher than those two sets of 5. The 10 fingers, the 5 on the right hand and the 5 on the left hand. Here's a level that's higher than that, and that's what he's referring to here. Uhu over Lefneim, the place where Yaakov is the Ikka, because that's the Kavana Pnimiyus. And one more line. If you may recall, at the beginning of the paragraph on page 1415, he brought from Sefer Yetzirah. He said there are 10 fingers, and those are the 10 spheres. 5 on the right hand is Chesed, and 5 on the left is Gevurah. But then he said, Bris Yachid Mechuven Be'emtza, and the Bris is only 1. There's no 10. There's no levels. It's a singular, and that's in the center. Not right, not left. So he says now that's the level. That's what the Sefer Yetzirah means one bris that's mechuven be'ensa, bechinas antu chad, v'lei bechushban, the level you are one, but not a countable one, not a definable one. She'ena bechesh bechinas chamish keneged chamish. Meaning it's beyond numbers, it's beyond the number of 5 corresponding to 5, which is the 5 fingers on the right hand and the 5 fingers on the left hand. So there it's already in a structure of 5 and 5, Chesed and Gevurah, which is the 2 levels of Hul, the Teva, Lira. This Chad corresponds to the Chad that is Tov Mikulon, which is higher than all of them, this higher level of Pnimiyus Makif, Pnimiyus HaKeser, the highest level. So I would say that the Hula Teva is probably Pnimiyus of the Pnimiyus HaKeser relative to Chetzenius HaKeser of Hula Ra, but the real Atzmius and Pnimiyus of Keser is the level of Tov Mikulim. So you could maybe say, he doesn't say it explicitly, I'm just thinking out loud, that maybe it's the difference between Chesenius Atik and Pnimiyus Atik, with Hula Ra being Arich, the Chesenius HaMakif. That the Arich, that he said, Erech HaPayim Lefonov, which is the level of Arich. Then there's the level of Atik, which would be a higher level, but still not the Pnimiyus Atik and Pnimiyus HaMakif that he's talking about now, which is the highest level of them all. Okay, I see there's more to talk about this. He's not finished. So maybe this will become clarified in the next section here. But I'll stop here if anybody wants to ask anything. Any questions?
I thought there were a bunch of people ahead of me, but I'll ask. A couple things. I thought previously he said, hey, Chasadim are Pnimiyus Atik, and now you're saying it's the who that's above them. So I'm a little confused about that.
Excuse me, what did you say? What did you cite?
Well, just before when he was explaining the Hey Gross and Hey Chasadim, he said, I thought he said that the Hey Gross were Chitzonius Atik and the Hey Chasadim were Pnimiyus Atik, but now...
Where did he say that? I don't remember that at all.
I'll have to go back and look. So let's skip that question. The second question is, it's the second time he keeps mentioning the Bris, and it's the EMSA. And we talked about left and right. And is this in any? I know this is from left field, so you can just swipe it away if it's a crazy thought and totally irrelevant. But it reminds me of the Bris Ben Abasarim. Is there any connection there?
Not that I would know of. I mean, Bris is a covenant. That's the only thing. Here he's talking about the Bris, referring to the Bris on the body, the organ of Yesod. So.
He's calling it Yochid, maybe Yochid higher than Yechido.
I don't know about that either. He doesn't say that right now, but it's definitely connected to those levels.
Otherwise, how is
He's
the word
comparing it
Yochid?
Tov Mikulin. He's saying the Tov Mikulin, which he called as Chad, the Shmaya Atzmi. Yeah.
Is the neshama coming from this level? From the Hutav Mikol, this level, which is higher than Shmo, you said before.
I refer you back to the text inside, half of page 1406, where he describes exactly where the neshama comes from. You've asked this question before, and I always go back to what it says inside. You need to look inside. He says the following, that the neshama, Daka b'me'ed mo'ed, which is called Yechida, is rooted in which is koyach nitzutz echad nivra, in it is mislabish the nitzutz cotton ma'oid beira, which is the tachtena, what you call adar achreina shebebeira. That manifests within the nitzutz echad nivra, which is called the neshama daka b'me'ed ma'oid, which is called yechida. So that's what he says. The neshama is the level of yechida. Yechida is rooted in the yachid, which is the level of nitzutz cotton beira. So that's what he says.
I am referring to the thing that you said now, that in who you have 2 levels also. You have the who about the Eibishter, that he is above all the other who's. and you said that this is the Helam HaAtzmi.
So he said earlier, neshamas are rooted in the Helam HaAtzmi, yes. He did say neshamas are rooted in the Helam HaAtzmi. If you want to see where, look on page 1408. He said
and
that.
this is higher than oil hakol b'atzmuso, the shame, right?
I don't know. When you say oir hakol b'atzmuso, you mean shmoi or oir?
Shmoi.
No, this is the level of shmoi hakol b'atzmuso. Helam HaAtzmi, shmoi hakol b'atzmuso, he calls Helam HaAtzmi.
So why is Yaakov the who, when we're talking about Yaakov, is a higher level of the who, the Chamisha L'Teva?
You just said it's Tav Mikulim. Chamish L'Teva and Chamish L'Ra is already Chesed and Gevurah. This is Pnimiyus Atik.
My question is, why Yaakov Davka?
Yaakov is like Neshamas Yisrael.
Thank you.
And Esav is not. Okay.
Regarding that line, yeah, on the top of the page where it says, "V'hu aval ifnehem lemala me'b'chinas Yaakov Esav b'chinas tohu v'tikun." Does he include b'chinas tohu v'tikun in b'chinas Yaakov Esav? It's above Yaakov and Esav tohu and tikun, or is he saying it's lemala b'chinas Esav? It's b'chinas tohu v'tikun.
But he said in the previous page, tohu v'tikun is already in Ishtalshalos. That's where Esav and Yaakov are brothers. 2 levels. So at the bottom, previous page. So there's Toyo and Tikun, Yaakov, Esav as brothers. Ach, Esav, Yaakov. That's the level in Chesed and Makif where Chashech and Ka'era, they're equals, twins. And then, in that itself, there's a deeper level, Pnimiyus Makif as Yaakov Dafke. That is the Pnimiyus that Dafka wants Yaakov. That's higher than Toyo and Tikun and higher of Yaakov and Esav as they are in that structure. V'shama Ika Yaakov Dafka. So there's a level where there's an equality, and there's a level that's beyond that. Like we've been learning. Beyond Makif, darkness and light are equal. There's a certain equality. There's a certain what I said, detachment, or I said
indifference.
Indifference, right? Those words.
And that's beyond Tohu and Tikun. That's where Yaakov is preferred.
Which one you? There are 2 different levels where they're equal. Chashecha ka'era, like darkness, like light. And there's a level where he dafka wants light, and the Pnimiyus dafka wants Yaakov. Or if that loves Yaakov dafka. Okay.
But isn't that a lower level, like later down when they separate?
I'm not sure what you're asking exactly. When they're separate, what do you mean separate? When they're in Toyu and Tikun, they're like equals. And then there's a level in the Pnimiyus that Dafka wants Yaakov. Not clear what the question is. Is there a 3rd level? I mean, what do you mean? What are you referring to?
Because he's saying it's Lamala B'chinas Yaakov Esav Tohu and Tikun. It's above any of those differentiations and the splittings. And there, before even any splitting, he prefers Yaakov. Okay, it doesn't make sense to me because they're not there. It's above
so
any.
Let's take it offline because it was just going in circles. I'm not sure what's the issue here. Okay.
One thing I just
let me continue on reading.
Just one comment concerning our mitzvah and avera. When we are talking about that all the mitzvah accumulating and finally will reach the level when it will help us to bring Mashiach, and avera eventually destroyed during the processing and doesn't have any influence. From these levels that you just explained, I realize that might be mitzvahs are going through Makif of both levels and then reach the Makif of Atik and there might be accumulated. to the point when we will reach the level that is necessary.
I didn't really understand what you said, but okay, fine. Okay, let's continue. So it says Bris Yochid, that's Bris Yochid. The Yeshlemer, the Rebbe Rashab continues. The Inyan Bris Yochid, Mechuven Be'emtza. Remember, that's the language from the Sefer Yetzirah, where he's comparing two different levels. The 10 fingers, two sets of 5, corresponding like to the 5 L'Teva and to 5 L'Ra. And then there's the Bris Yochid, so the Rebbe Rashab is connecting that to the Medrash that says that's the Tov Mikulam, that God is even greater, the Hu. Like he brought in the beginning of the Medrash, where it says, Hu Hashem Elokein b'chol ha'aretz mishpatav shemidus rachem of la'elam. When he began explaining the Medrash in Parsha Noach on page 1413. So now he adds, he says, this idea of the Bris Yochid, b'chuvim be'emtza, this singular Bris, which is in the center, like we see in the Sefiros, Chesed is to the right, Gevurah is to the left, Sefiros is in the center. Netzach to the right, Hoy to the left, Yesod, which is Bris, center. Malchus is also center. Daas is center, Kesser is center. So when you structure it like three tracks, you have right, left, and center. So Bris is Mechuven Be'em, so he says, Yesh Lemer, Hainu b'chinas Pnimiyus Sefiros. Okay, till now he's talking about Pnimiyus HaKesed. He's saying, when it's Mechuv Be'emtza, remember, Yesod and Bris is already in the Sefiros structure. It's in the sporadic structure. Kesed is before you have the 10 spheres. Bris is already in the spheres. So what is it referring to when you're saying the center? So he says, Yeshem is the Pnimiyus of the Sefiros. So now he's introducing that in the Sefiros themselves, which are Pnimiyim, they're Mamala Kalalman. Remember, Kesed is a Makif. The Sefiros themselves, Chachma Bina Das, is already the divine energy, each one that is localized and defined, proportionate to its Eris and Kalim. So in that world, he says, the Bris refers to Pnimiyus Sefiros. Ukiyadua. And now, before I continue, let me just give a little introduction, because I see this last page, I would say, this last half a page is very, very dense. It's a wild guess, maybe, but if the Rebbe Rashab had gone over this, I would guess that he would have probably unpacked it and elaborated more, because I see it's very concentrated. Every few lines, he just says something, it doesn't really elaborate, and requires more explanation. Same thing here. He's now introducing us to yet another theme, which is relevant to the whole picture, and that is like this: the Sefiros themselves. And now we're talking about Eris and Kalim, Mamala Kalalman. They too have a Pnimiyus and a Chitzenius. So it's not just that Kesser is the Pnimiyus and the Sefiros are Chitzenius. The Sefiros also have an inner and an outer dimension, which he's now going to address. And he's going to explain a very fundamental topic, which you may have heard of. We've spoken about it a number of times. When they say there's only 10 spheres, the Sefer Yetzirah says, Loi Teisha, Eser v'loi achad aser, Eser v'loi Teisha. Or Eser v'loi Teisha. 10 and not 9, and 10 and not 11. Dafka 10. So here comes the big question. Kesser is a sphere at times. The 10 spheres from Chachma to Malchus are 10. Kesser is an 11th. So what's going on here? How could there be 11 spheres? So the Eitz Chaim answers and explains, because you don't count Kesser and Das together. When you count Das, which is the third of the Moichin, Chachma Bina Das, you don't count Kesser. When you count Kesser, you don't count Das. Question is, when do you count which and which? How does it work? It's not just a numbers game. So it answers, when you count the Sefiros from their Pnimiyus Dika perspective, you count Das. You don't count Kesser, because Pnimiyus Kesser is beyond everything. Das is fundamentally a Pnimi, because remember, Das, as he explains in Tanya, in chapter 3, is from the word hiskashrus. It's concentration, it's bonding with something. Chachma Bina is conceiving and understanding an idea, but it could still be that you haven't bonded with it. You haven't yet delved, or you haven't penetrated or pierced into the very pnimius of the idea. So Daas is fundamentally a Pnimiyus experience. So when you count the spheres in Pnimiyus, you count Daas. Pnimiyus of Chesed is beyond spheres. When you count the spheres on an external level, meaning on their outer expression, so you don't count Daas because Daas is a Pnimi, fundamentally a Pnimi. But you count what? Chitzenius of Chesed, which does relate to the spheres, because if you remember, Arich is Reish Hanatzolim. It's not Netak Umuvdal. Atik is separate, is beyond, completely transcendent. Arich is beyond, it's a Makif, but it's a Makif that relates to the spheres, is the Reish Hanatzolim. In the interface of Chesed, as he explains in Eitz Chaim, Atik represents more the divine energy, Tachteina Sheba Maitzil, as we've been learning, and Atik represents existence, meaning the Reish Hanatzolim. It's still not the emanations, but it's the beginning of the emanation. It's the head of the emanations. So when you count the spheres from an outer level, the outer Chesed, you can count. You don't count Das. That's the general explanation. It's still a Maimorim that talk about that and analyze it further. It's more complicated than what I just said, but for our purposes, it's enough to be able to understand what he's going to say now. So now he's going to say following. So let's read now inside. It's known that the Sefiros, from the point of view of their outer, like sometimes you speak about Chitzenius Hakeli and Pnimiyus Hakeli. Remember, Chitzenius Hakeli, let's say in a physical sense, is a cup of kos, let's say with wine that you make kiddush on. The Chitzenius is the lip and the outer dimension that you can drink from. It's its function, and also to pour others. The Pnimiyus Hakeli is the inside of the cup that has to be conducive and fitting to contain wine. You could have an outer keli that is in shape, but you could have the inner keli can be compromised, or vice versa. So generally speaking, the spheres have also both elements. The chitzenius of the spheres is more how they're mashpia, how they're transmitting. The pnimiyus of the spheres is more how they're receiving from the higher levels, and so on. So there's the pnimiyus of, when you talk chitzenius of spheres, he says, ha-keser nimna. Then you count keser. Imohem. Keser is counted with the chitzenius asfiris. Which level of keser? Shezeh b'chinas chitzenius ha-keser. Arich. That's the outer dimension of keser. Obe pnimiyus asfiris. But when you're dealing with the pnimiyus, the inner dimension, their inner function, so to speak, hu shemeir behem b'chinas pnimiyus v'atzmus ein sof. So they're more of a keli to the inner and core of Ein Sof, even though they are spheres. But now they're accessing a deeper level. Al yedei b'chinas hadas, through b'chinas hadas. So they're receiving through Das, because Das is, as I said, a pnimi. Because Das has that ability to concentrate and penetrate deeply into something. That's why Das is also compared to intimacy. What does the Torah call intimacy? Adam yodas chava. The Alter Rebbe brings it in chapter 3 in Tanya. He brings it that Adam Yoda's Chava, Adam knew Chava. What does it mean, knew? Because Yoda is not just a superficial or external experience, it's intimacy. It's becoming one with another. Like V'hoya lebasar echad. So you can understand an idea, but it's still not one with you. And Das refers to a deeply internalized experience where it's become completely one with you, seamlessly one with you. So when you're talking about Das, so Das is the way you b'mamshich the pnimiyus, and that's why you count Das and not Kesed. As discussed, as explained elsewhere at length. This may be the Hemshech Samachei, Tofrei Samachei, Shvuos. There the Rebbe Rashab explains this more at length. He may be referring to that. I'd have to look at them. There are other places as well. In Biuri Hazeyar, there's a few other places where this is discussed in Terer, but Samachei, he discusses this more at length. So now, how does this refer to the Bris? Remember, the Bris is also Mechuvan Be'emtza. It's also a Pnimi. So he says, V'ze'in Be'emtza. The Hainu B'chinas HaPnimiyus. And that's what it means, Mechuvan Be'emtza. It's not just a geographical location. The reason the Bris is in the center, like Das is in the center, because it's a center type of experience, which means it's in the inner core. Right and left are more on the periphery. And Emsa here referring into the pnimius of it, b'chinas ha'pnimius shagam ba'esas spheres meir b'chinas zu. that also in the 10 spheres, they should radiate this level of Pnimiyus. So that's the point. That, in other words, he's saying here, so the Pnimiyus Makif, which is not counted, but through Daas, and then through the Bris, you're drawing from that level into the spheres as well. So you can't, so you count Daas, but you don't count Keser, but you're drawing into the, so in other words, Mamala Kalalman, even though it's the first of the 3 levels, but ultimately, the goal is not just to draw from Chesed Makif, but all the way from the Pnimiyus and of HaAtzmi Sein Sof, that should also be drawn into the spheres. And that's why, indeed, you say, for example, the Gemara says, "Ein kishe ela b'das," that a person cannot be stimulated, a man, without das. It means he has to concentrate. It has to be a mind. It's not something that's just superficial. It's a deep concentration that comes connected to das, and that's, of course, the connection to the bris. That's one thing he explains, mechuven be'emsa. He's going to give another explanation now, well, further explanation, I should say. But let me stop again if anybody wants to ask anything. So if I were to elaborate a bit more about this, I would say the following. When God created existence, as we've been learning, there's the outer energy of the Sodom Amoris, of God saying, I want to create existence, Yehi Oyer, Yehi Rakia. That energy, as we learned earlier, is a certain amount of energy, but he called it a Yichud Chitzeni. Because in Bria Se'elamis, the energy, remember the creation is a means to something else. When he created a neshama, it says, Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim b'pnimiyusei, b'techiyusei pnimiyusei. He didn't just, the soul has an inner dimension of godliness more than the rest of creation. Like the difference that when you create you build a home for your family, so the home itself, you're obviously investing a certain amount of energy to build a home, but the real energy is for your family. So that's the real Pnimiyus, is like he explains in Tanya as well about mitzvahs. Pnimiyus Ratzon Elyon is mitzvahs. The physical object with which we do mitzvahs, that's already a means to an end. So the same idea is that, so the chitzenius of the spheres are generally more focused on, or well, let's put it this way, creation is receiving more from the outer dimension, like 6 days of the week. What do we say? 6 days of the week, and then God rested. What do you mean he rested? He wasn't tired. It means he went back into his Pnimiyus, because lav the urchet de malka lishtamish b'mila de hedyeta. The expression goes, a king, his real natural place is in his inner sanctum.
Leishtoi.
Yeah. So that's not the real role of the king. Is there are times he speaks about milided means more mundane matters. Like, mundane matters, when you get involved in mundane matters, which is more technical, more material, and so on. So he does it as well, but he's not putting his full energy in there. Where do you see the full pnimiyus energy of Elikus? You'll see it in Kedusha, in Shabbos, in that context. So the same thing is 6 days of creation is more the chitzenius of the spheres. The Pnimiyus what's the kavanah of it all. The kavanah is to be elevated to Shabbos Kodesh. Like he says, V'shav sa'aret Shabbos la'Hashem. The purpose is to transform the material world. So yes, kavanah ha'atzmus is dafke tachtenim, but the kavanah should be a dira b'tachtenim. So you really want to bring into the chitzenius, you want to bring Pnimiyus. What's the Pnimiyus HaKavanah? To transform the world. It's not an end in itself to have a material world. It's to turn it into a mishkan, gold, silver, and copper, to turn it into a mishkan, a dwelling place for God to manifest, the godliness to manifest. So you want to bring into the chitzenius the Pnimiyus of the spheres. The Pnimiyus of the spheres, in turn, you want them to access, like he's saying here, the Pnimiyus of Keser, which is where the Kavanah originates from. In the process, there's the chitzenius of the Makif, which has something similar to the chitzenius of the Pnimi, because the chitzenius of the Makif is where that indifferent place, that so-called more removed place, that allows energy to flow to Yaakov and Esav, to Teva and to Ra. But the Pnimius of Keser, the Pnimius HaKavanah, is Dafke Gedusha. And that's what you want to draw down also into existence, not just from the Chesenis of the spheres, but also the Pnimiyus of the spheres. So that explains Mamala Kalaman has a Chesenis and a Pnimiyus, Seviv Kalaman, Keser has a Chesenis and a Pnimiyus, and the goal, of course, is to bring the deepest levels of Pnimiyus all the way from what he called the HaAtzmi, from the Stima de Kol Stima of Pnimiyus HaKeser Atik, all the way down into the spheres, that the Pnimiyus of the spheres should radiate into the Chesenis of the spheres, and that's how you transform. That's the mechanics of transforming all of existence when we talk about it in a spherotic structure. So you want Seviv to radiate into Mamala, but the Pnimiyus of Seviv, the Pnimiyus ultimately comes from a level that's higher than Seviv, which, like he's saying here, Asmu Sein Sof, which is higher than Seviv and Mamala, which relates to Pnimiyus Makif, Atik. Okay, so that is explaining a bit more the context of what we're learning right now in the broader picture.
Is the Pnimiyus of, let's say, a sphera or a level, is it the root of that level, like one level up, if you will, or not necessarily?
I would say it's more like the neshama and a guf, soul and body. The soul is the Pnimiyus of the Chesenis of the body. You could say Ur and Keli like. Even though he says it on spheres, but generally speaking, it's like thinking of the outer expression of the spheres and the inner, and its inner energy within it. Like I said, Chochmah Bina Daas has their particular function. But if you were to ask Chochmah Bina Daas, what's your purpose? Chochmah say, my purpose is to express divine wisdom. Bina is to express divine understanding. Chesed is to express divine kindness. So there's the kindness aspect is more like its outer expression, and the inner would be its purpose and like deeper meaning behind it. Okay?
Yeah, 100%. But we talked about Chesonius Atik is the source of the Hey Gvurus, and Pnimiyus Atik is the source of the Hey Chasadim. No,
He doesn't say that. I asked you where he said that. I don't remember that being said.
I have to go back and look at it. All right, I'm confused. Sorry.
Now we're talking about the spheres. We're not talking about, right? We talked about the spheres is the 10 spheres. Now, then there's Keser, is its own story. Chesenis and Pnimiyus and Keser. They are related to some extent, and this also connects it back in volume 1, when he spoke about 3 levels in spheres, 3 meanings and 3 levels. Then he went to 3 levels in Keser. So you have the 3 both in Pnimi and in Makif. 3 being, 1 is more relates to existence, and the second is beyond, but not completely beyond, and the third is completely beyond. So it's like Chesenis of Arich, Pnimiyus of Arich, and then Atik. And then there's in Sefiros, Mispar, Sipur, and Sapir. So it's all related to what we're learning here. So there are 3 dimensions, essentially. And you want to obviously bring from the deepest one into the outer one, into the outer dimension. So for instance, using the classic example, the teacher teaching a student Aleph Beis. So there's a deep tzimtzum where he conceals all his brilliance, and the student is only hearing Aleph Beis Gimel, just the basics. But within the Aleph Beis Gimel, ultimately the kavanah is the student should grow and expand his containers and expand his intelligence and be able to understand what lies behind the Aleph Beis Gimel, and be able to compose letters into words and words into sentences and sentences into paragraphs, into chapters, into volumes. So he gains knowledge. So the Aleph Beis Gimel, which was just a minuscule amount of what the teacher has to offer, contains in it a lot more Pnimiyus. But through the process of study, you start learning the deeper meaning of something, and deeper and deeper, till Koi Inish Adaita the Rabba by Abai and Shnin. 40 years, a person begins to appreciate the deeper Pnimiyus, and you keep growing. So the goal is that essentially the Pnimiyus should inform and permeate the Chesenis. But you have to begin, like we've talked many times, Mutfa Murgish Muskel, from the bottom up. You begin first where you are. B'chol Levavcha, then B'chol Nafshcha, B'chol Meidecha. You begin with Mamala Kalam in the minimal sense of it. How much energy I can relate to godliness, and then I want more of that. Like we learned the Ava to reveal the godliness within each of us. Then you grow to Seviv Kalaman, where you come to understand God is beyond. Then even to the highest level, that God is beyond, even beyond. and ultimately the joining of all three, that the deepest Pnimiyus should radiate in the outer Chitzenis. And that's like a dira, lo yizbarach, la'atzmusei yizbarach, b'tachtenim. The two extremes. It's la'atzmusei, the deepest levels of atzmus, all the way down, dira in tachtenim. So the outer should ultimately shine in a seamless fashion and should manifest and channel to the deepest Pnimiyus. So first there has to be Chesed Pnimiyus in Sefiros, then Chesed Pnimiyus in Makif, all the way to the deepest level that he's been talking about, Pnimiyus Atik, Tachtein Shebamaitzil, etc., etc. So the context of Neshamas and Torah, so Neshama comes down below, it's then subject to the laws of Mamala Kalaman, because the Neshama comes into a body, it's concealed. Yes, the Neshama is fundamentally rooted in a very high level, but it's concealed. When it learns Torah, Torah illuminates it. And the Torah, and with the Einehe Eda, the eyes that guide and illuminate and guide the guiding light, that begins to shine, and the Neshama begins to grow. As the Neshama grows, it ultimately triggers some of the deeper forces within the Neshama all the way. So in the beginning, the eye is just seeing with the light from the outside light in the dark that's allowing the eye to see. But ultimately, the goal is that the eye itself is going to see, because it's going to access Etzem Koyach Hariyah, Ishen Einai, the pupil of the eye, all the way as it is in Atzmus Koyach Hariyah, to the point that the eye itself will see. So the Neshama will ultimately connect the Pnimiyus and the Chitzenis, but it has to go through these stages. That's the broader context of what we're learning here. So he still has more to say on this be'emtza, mechuvan be'emtza on the Bris, which is higher than the Chad Mekula, higher than the 5 and 5, the 10 spheres, but we'll do that in the next class. So I'm going to stop here. By the V'yesh Leimer on middle of, it's the third way down, page 1416. Any other questions?
It's very heavy, and I need to go back and read it and listen to it again. But on this idea of the revelation of the Pnimiyus, is it a revelation of what's truly inside, or is it a hamshacha of the source of from where that madrega is residing, if you will, or both?
It's stages. I mean, the ultimate is that the nigla kved Hashem v'roa kol basa yachdav, when Mashiach comes, that the flesh itself will perceive and experience godliness, like we do today through vision, through with our eyes. So I think it's all a matter of stages. First, it flows from there, and then it transforms, and then at some point, Adira B'Tachtenim would mean that the very physical existence, like a Mishkan,
itself,
is a dwelling place for godliness, for Shachanti B'Sechem.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
I mean, I'd go back to the examples. The student doesn't, through stages, the student first will begin to appreciate what the teacher's inner intentions are and deeper understanding. Then there comes a point where it says Chushei HaTalmid ke Chushei HaRav, where the actual senses of the student will be like it's like you've so assimilated the methodology of your teacher, it becomes one with you, and you can't even distinguish between them because you're so integrated. So it's all a matter of level of integration. That's the
yes, very, very nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And I also see where he's going with this. He wants to come away, telling us that not only do we bring the light into the holy places, but we also have the power to transform the raw, the negative forces as well, as we're going to learn. That's what he's going to come away and say, which is interesting because that was the theme of the interface Mamata Lamala through Tshuva. Now he's speaking about it Mamata Lamata, so it also has the power to do so. Interesting. Okay, just thinking out loud. We'll talk about it more when we get there. Yeah. I see where he's going with this. Wow, okay.
Does that lead to, is that part of sublimating the evil at its root, do you think? Like on the 5 fingers?
Well, that was Momata Lamaila when he spoke before that, yes, sublimating the evil or the Gevurah at its root. That was the ultimate transformation of Einoid from the bottom up. I think here he's going to speak how it's done from the top down. That's what he's going to lead to, yes. So there's 2 ways to do that.
Thank you, Rabbi.
No, this is definitely we're going to talk about it because it's very fundamental to the whole structure of Ayin Beis. Okay, good. So we'll stop here. First third of the page on page 1416. Yeah, moving along here.